Hello and welcome back to this tutorial series where we implement a full text search on entities. So far we implemented a REST endpoint, a simple domain model consisting of an author and a book, and we connected it all to Postgres database. We also set up some Pulsar cluster, but so far it's not interacting with our application in any way. And now we're gonna add the Debezium connector to our Pulsar cluster. So if you never heard of Debezium, let's have a quick look at the official website. I recommend that if you never heard of Debezium, you should definitely read the website, and they also provide an FAQ, which I think is really helpful about explaining what is Debezium, where does the name come from, what is change data capturing, and so on. So definitely take a look. If I have to describe it with my own words, I would say imagine Debezium is like a little application that runs inside of your Pulsar cluster, and it will listen for all the changes that happen on your database. And a change can really be any transaction that is committed, like create, an update, or a delete statement. So it will really notice everything that happens on the database, no matter if you do it manually or if it's done by your application. And to actually run this little app inside of our Pulsar cluster, we have to download this application. So we go to pulsar.apache.org and check out the download section. And here you find a bunch of I/O connectors. In this case, Debezium is the I part of I/O, so it acts as an input for a topic that it's going to create for us. So here's a Debezium Postgres CDC. CDC means change data capture. And you actually have to download this nar file, which is this small application that I just mentioned. You can imagine it like a small application that you have to download. I already did that, so I'm not going to download it again. And once you have it, you can basically copy it over into the Docker folder. And as you can see, I created a new folder named IO connectors, and inside is this little nar file. And what we also going to need is a configuration for our Debezium application. So I'm going to copy that over. Just like that. And if you're interested where all this config is coming from, you can find it on the documentations of Pulsar. Just in the menu here, look out for Pulsar IO, and here you find built-in connector, which has a section on the Debezium Postgres. And when you look at the example, you find two examples, one in JSON format and one as YAML, which is pretty much what I'm using here. So the only interesting modifications, make sure you have the correct version and make sure you provide the correct user to your database and the password. They use Postgres as password, I use change.me. You have to specify this database server name because it will become part of the topic name, but it can be whatever. Make sure you specify this plugin. It's not given here, but you absolutely need it. This is a plugin that Postgres will contain by default. Just make sure you use Postgres in a version 9.4 or newer. And actually, we have to tell it which schemas we want to listen to and which tables. So here I'm going to listen for the book table. And now with the Debezium application basically and the configuration in place, we can mount both of them into our Docker container. So I'm just going to copy that over, and these two commands basically will just mount the nar file under Pulsar connectors, Pulsar IO, and so on, and also mount the config file under Pulsar conf and so on. And a second thing that we're gonna need is we have to actually increase the write-ahead log level of our Postgres database. And therefore, I'm also gonna copy over the configuration for Postgres. Just name it whatever you like. And the important part here is that we upgrade the write-ahead log level to logical. Otherwise, Debezium cannot read the changes on the database. Also make sure that you have this line, otherwise you cannot reach your database. So I'm gonna paste in the config here as well. And this basically also mounts the config file that we created to whatever path you like. Just make sure that you also have the startup command. And here you can define where Postgres should look for its configuration. So this path has to be exactly the same as this one. Where exactly you put it doesn't matter. So I actually made a small mistake. Just make sure that the database name here is entity search. Otherwise, before I had Postgres, which is not correct. If this is all fixed, we can start our Docker setup. I'm gonna bring up an additional terminal here on the side, and I'm gonna connect into the Docker, into the Pulsar Docker container, just to make sure that everything is there as we expected. So here you can see this is the Debezium connector that is mounted, and in the conf folder we actually see the Debezium config. So this is all pretty nice. It lists of topics that it created. So for our tenant public and the namespace default, we already have 2 Debezium topics, which you can see here. But we're not interested in this one. This is internal stuff of Debezium and not what we actually want to listen to. I'm now going to restart the application, which will recreate the tables. When we now take a look at the topics, we will see a difference. As you can see, we have a new topic here, which is called Fuber Public Book. And this is basically the combination of this value here and whatever we provided here. So now I'm going to listen to this newly created topic from Debezium. So I create a consumer. So this uses the Pulsar client to create a consumer, listening to the topic that we just saw and using the name local Debezium subscription. And this -n basically means that we will keep the subscription even after we receive the message. So now we can actually do some change on the database. So I'm going to connect again to the Postgres database. Password change me and take a look at the tables first. And we still see the author and book table. Now I'm going to update something in the book table. So I'm going to change the name to Hello World for the ID number 1. And as we can see, the change immediately shows up here in our subscription. So interesting is everything in the content part, where we have the before state, which currently is null. I will explain that in a second. And the after state basically provides us all the data from the table. So I'm going to bring up the table here. And you basically see all the properties or all the columns that the table has. The ID, the new name that I just provided with the update command, the pages, and even the author ID. So I can change it back basically. I think it was Dark Tower before. And again, we see it instantly updates, and here it has the new name. So this before null basically is because Postgres is not providing this data by default. So Debezium tries to, or Debezium is capable of providing actually the state before the update and after. But to fill this one, we actually need to run some command in Postgres. And I'm just going to showcase it here. We alter the table and set the replica identity to full, which is basically increasing like the log level. And when I now update the book entry again to hello world, you can see now the before value is also filled. So we see the ID, the name of the book before I updated it was Dark Tower, and we also see here the after part. After the update, it's hello world. So this gives us the capability to listen to all changes that happen on the application, no matter if I do it manually or if it's triggered by the app. Debezium will notice it all and stream it into Pulsar. So that's it for this part. I think that was the most complicated one, especially if you're not familiar with Debezium or with Pulsar. So in the next session, we're gonna actually connect our app to read the changes that we see here. And from there, we will stream it to Elasticsearch. So see you there.